Good evening and welcome back to Protector of the Small, Book 2, Page, Chapter 2, Adjustments. The dog was still asleep on her bed. He was not alone. While Kell had to keep the big shutters locked when she was out, the small pair over them were open in all weather, so the sparrows that had adopted her could fly in and out. 3 now perched on her coverlet, eyeing the dog with interest. "He isn't staying," Kell told the small brown birds. The dog's tail wagged, though he didn't open his eyes. One sparrow flew over and perched on her shoulder with a peep. It was the female who led the flock. A pale spot on top of her head had earned her the name Crown. Kell gave the small bird a sunflower seed and gathered her books. Crown flew back to the bed to continue her inspection of the newcomer. The palace animals were peculiar. They seemed wiser in the human sense than most other animals. The difference was caused by a young woman named Dane, the wild mage, whose magic allowed her to communicate with animals. After she had talked to Kell's gelding, Peach Blossom, the vicious horse allowed Kell to ride him without making her bleed for the privilege. Even Dane's mere presence affected palace animals permanently. 3 months before, Kell's sparrows had led Kell and a troop of hunters to the lair of the giant, human-headed spider monsters called spidrins, though Dane had not been there to ask it of them. Might Dane help with this dog? Kell wondered as she locked the door behind her. Neil had been waiting in the corridor. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Come, Mindolin," he said cheerfully, towing her toward the classroom wing. "While you were riding your evil horse and bending a bow all summer, did you crack a single book?" "I helped the housekeeper with the accounts," retorted Kell, letting her friend tow her. "Did you bend a bow or ride a horse all summer?" "Had to," Neil said gloomily as they walked into their first class, reading and writing with the Mithrin pieced Yayan. "Our master-at-arms kept after me." She sat next to him. "We'll make a knight of you yet, Queen's Cove." "That's what I'm afraid of," he retorted. After class, Kell returned to her rooms to find that life had suddenly improved. A full tub of hot water awaited her. She could take a real bath while the ugly dog looked on. As she soaked, Kell realized he, too, had been washed. His fine short fur shone white between scars. He was still homely. His legs were a little bowed, supporting a barrel chest and thin hips. She had already noticed that twice-broken tail and his torn ear. His whole ear was sharp, pointed and upright on a head shaped like a thick axe blade. That skull looked too big even for his sturdy neck, but the dog lifted it with pride. "You will never be a beauty," Kell informed him as she dried off. He wagged his absurd tail, as if she'd complimented him. As she put on a brown shift, orange gown, and stockings (she always wore a dress to supper, in case anyone had forgotten that she was a girl), she noticed other welcome changes. Her desk had been neatened, her clothes pressed till not a single wrinkle was left. There was a bowl, empty even of crumbs, and a half-empty water dish. The girl Alassa had washed and fed the dog. She had also found Kell's store of seeds and filled the sparrows' feed and water dishes. No bird droppings could be seen anywhere. Someone pounded on her door. "Kell, come on!" yelled Neil. "I'm hungry." When she opened the door, he poked his head inside. "The cooks say there's ham and blueberry pie since it's the first day. I love blueberry pie. Mithras, this is the ugliest dog in the world!" He stepped inside. The dog trotted over to sniff him energetically. His crooked tail began to whip. He stood on his hind legs, braced his paws on Neil's long thighs, and rooted at one of the youth's pockets. "Caught me out, old man, didn't you?" asked Neil with a grin. He crouched, pulling a roll from his pocket, and gave it to the dog. It was gone in 3 bites. "You know we can't have dogs," he reminded Kell, scratching the animal's rump. "Mithros and Goddess, he is ugly." "You said that already." "I know I can't have a dog, Neil. Will the wild mage take him?" "Dane? Of course," he replied. "She's here. I saw her last night. Ask her after supper." "Did you maybe want to go with me?" she offered gingerly, afraid that she might cause Neil hurt by asking him along. Last year he had introduced her to Dane when Kell had needed help with Peach Blossom. Kell had seen that Neil was smitten with Dane, though she lived with the mage Numair Samalin. "No," he told Kell nobly inside. It just tries my heart to see her with that old man. Kell didn't think Master Numer was so old, but she held her tongue. It did no good to argue with her love-struck friend. Kell, is Neil here? Merrick stuck his head into the room. Let's be prompt to supper, shall we? His blue eyes widened. Ah, it's an ugly dog. You know we aren't allowed pets. He goes to Dane tonight, Kell snapped. She thrust her friends from the room. The king joined them for supper, as he had the year before. He ate with Lord Wilden, then spoke to the pages and the few squires present about the importance of their studies. Kell watched and listened, her face yamani smooth. While she owed King Jonathan her duty and her service, she still wasn't sure that she liked him. The king had allowed Lord Wilden to put Kell on a year's probation, something no other page had to endure. It had not been fair. Suddenly she remembered something her father had said when the Amani emperor ordered the execution not only of a band of robbers, but of their women and children as well. Rulers are seldom nice people, Kell, he'd remarked, his eyes sad. Even good ones make choices that will hurt somebody. But what if I want him to be nice? She asked her father, now as she watched her king smile at the eager boys. What if I want him to be fair? You may want anything you like, her mother would have said. It doesn't mean you'll get it. She smiled, but she kept it inside. She didn't want the king to think she smiled at him. As soon as the king had gone, Lord Wilden called, Kelladry of Mindolin! Now what? Thought Kell, halfway to the door. Has he heard about the dog? She went back to the training master's table. At least he didn't keep her in suspense. I understand you have taken a maid into your service, he remarked when she bowed. Kell heaved an inner sigh of relief. Yes, my lord. You are permitted to do so. However, a servant is a privilege, not a right, in the page's wing. In addition to your obligations to anyone in your service, you have obligations to me and to the palace. He regarded her levelly, toying with his knife. She is not to involve herself physically with any page or squire. Her presence is not considered chaperonage for you. If there is a boy in your rooms, the door remains open. If she is ill, you will call and pay a healer. If she cannot read and write, you must teach her. If she misbehaves, is a thief or lewd or quarrelsome, you are liable. If she runs off or stays away overnight without your permission or disobeys you, do not ask palace guards or servants to find her or to help you to discipline her. That you must do yourself. Am I understood? Cal bowed. Yes, my lord. Do your duty by her and by us, Lord Weldon said firmly. You are dismissed. Cal left, finding that the halls had cleared while they talked. Most of the boys had vanished to begin their studies. Now Cal grabbed the dog and wrapped him in a blanket. You keep still, she ordered, as she carried him down the hall. The chambers where Dane lived were on the floor above the classrooms. The dog struggled on the narrow stair, finally poking his head out of the blanket. He then stopped fighting and gazed around with interest. He was so bony and so light. Couldn't she keep him until he made up for the meals he had missed? Kel stopped on the landing to blink eyes that stung with tears. She knew she was being silly. Dane would feed him well, and she could heal his wounds. She could talk to him through her magic and understand his replies. In a day or two, the dog wouldn't even remember Kel, he'd be so happy. Thoroughly miserable and determined to hide it, Kel resumed her climb to the second floor. Walking slowly, she checked engraved name plates on the doors until she found the one that read, Numer Salmelin, Veridine Sarasi. Wrestling a hand free of the blanket, Kel knocked. The door opened. For a moment, Kel was confused. She saw no one. A sharp whistle drew her gaze and the dog's down to the floor. A young dragon, just 2 feet tall, was looking up at them. Her scales were dusty blue, her large slit-pupiled eyes sky blue. She had draped her foot-long tail over a forepaw, like the train on a gown. Aren't you pretty? Kel said, admiring the small creature. She had seen the dragon Sky Song, nicknamed Kitten, before, though at a distance. Is Dane about? Dragons, even very young ones like Kitten, were supposed to be as intelligent as human beings. The dragon tilted her slender muzzle and voiced a trill, then raised herself on tiptoe to inspect the dog. Kel knelt politely so the two could look each other. Kelladry, hello, the wild maid said cheerfully as she came to the door. Welcome back. She was just 3 inches taller than Kell, and slender, with tumbling smoky curls and grave blue-gray eyes. She was dressed for rough work in breeches and shirt. Feathers clung to her hair. Her shirt was speckled with bird droppings and a streak of green slime that had to have come from a horse or donkey. Kell got to her feet and smiled at Dane. It's good to be back, my lady. Who's this? Dane stretched out her hands. As Kell handed the dog over, she explained how she had met him. My maid gave him a bath and some more food, so he doesn't look as bad as he did, she finished. But I can't keep him. Would you? He likes you already. It was true. The dog was gleefully licking Dane's face. When she set him down, he offered Kitten the same attention. Kitten stepped back with a shrill whistle. Scolded, the dog looked up at Kell and panted, tongue lolling. I can try to keep him, Dane said, a doubtful look in her eyes. He needs patching up and something for worms. He's barely more than a pup. She crouched beside the dog, running her hands over his scrawny frame. He says his name is Jump. Kell backed up. Name him as you like, my lady, she said, clenching her hands behind her back. She was not going to get upset over a dog she'd known less than half a day, and that dog going to the best home in the palace. Thank you for taking him. If there's anything I can do for you. Dane looked up at Kell. You came almost every day this summer to ride Peach Blossom and groom him, the wild maid said quietly. You bring him treats and go easy on the rein, when last year at this time he could look forward to another brutal master or death. And Crown and her flock say that you always stop by, though you knew Salma was looking after them. It is I who thank you, Kelladry, for them. You treat animals as well as you treat human beings. She smiled. I will try to keep Jump. If you find other animals in need, come to me. She offered her hand. Kell gripped it gently, mumbled something about appreciation, and fled. She had to stop in the stairwell to collect herself. Dane, the wild mage, thought well of her. Suddenly she heard a boy snap. I don't understand why I have to. She stiffened, her senses alert. Down the steps she went, cat silent, until she was just around the corner from the ground floor landing. It's a page's duty to obey. The perfectly chill voice belonged to Joran. You first-year squirts need lessening. That was Vincent of Genleth, one of Joran's cronies. Kell shook out her shoulders, loosening them up. This is a waste of time. The new voice belonged to Joran's closest friend, Zahir ibn al-Haz. Zahir had stopped helping the others to haze new pages last winter. We have better things to do. What? Demanded Vincent. You afraid the Lump and her friends? The Lump, or the Amani Lump, was their nickname for Kell. When you're done with children's games, Joran, let me know, Zahir said. Kell heard steps fade into the distance. After a moment, Joran said tightly, Get to work, boy. But cleaning spilled ink. I can't even see, protested the voice Kell had first heard. There was a thud. We see it, drawled a new voice belonging to Garvey of Runner Spring. He and Vincent were Joran's chief companions in hazing first years. Kell flexed her hands. They knew we didn't expect them to start up the first night of training, she thought angrily. They knew we'd think they were as tired as the rest of us, so they sneaked around and found a victim. She looked at her clothes. Since she hadn't expected to patrol the halls in search of bullies, she hadn't changed into shirt and breeches after supper. Fighting in a dress would be tricky. Rolling up her skirt, she gathered it one side and knotted it. I don't care if Arain thinks that sashes make me look thick-waisted, Kell told herself. Arain was her sharp-tongued second older sister. From now on, that's what I wear. Kell walked down the last few steps and into the ground floor hall. 10 yards away, one of the new first years, Owen of Jeslaw, lay on the floor. Vincent, Garvey, and Joran stood around him, leaving him nowhere to run. They turned when they heard Kell's sigh. I hoped you'd all realize how stupid this is, she remarked coolly. Joran smiled. My day is complete, he said. The 3 older boys moved apart, then closed in on Kell. Owen struggled to his feet. He was short and chubby, with plump hands and big feet. His tumble of brown curls looked as if somebody had yanked them. His gray eyes were set under brows shaped like question marks laid flat. Confused, he looked from Kell to the fourth years. "I'm sure you have classwork," Kell told him, shifting to put a wall at her back. "Get to it. These boys," she put a word of scorn into the word, "and I have a debate to continue." Owen stayed where he was. Maybe he doesn't understand, Kell thought. She backed up to draw the fight away from him. Garvey came at Kell from the right, punching at her head. She slid away from his punch, grabbed his arm, pushed her right foot forward, and twisted to the left. Garvey went over her hip into Vincent, who'd attacked on her left. Joran at the center came in fast as his friends hit the wall. Kell blocked Joran's punch to her middle, but his blow was a feint. His left fist caught her right eye squarely. Kell scissored a leg up and out, slamming her right foot into Joran's knee. Joran hissed and grabbed her hair. Someone else, Vincent, tackled her. Kell let his force throw her into Joran. Down the three of them went in a tumble. Joran let go of her hair, fighting to get out from under her and Vincent. Kell elbowed him in the belly and turned to thrust her other hand into Vincent's face, encouraging him to get off her by pressing his closed eyes with her fingers. Garvey waded in and grabbed the front of her gown to haul her to her feet. Owen, forgotten until that moment, struck him from behind. Down Garvey went, face first, chubby Owen clinging monkey-like to his back as Kell rolled out of the way. Owen beat Garvey wildly about the head and shoulders with one hand. Not much technique, Kell thought as she got to her knees, but he's got plenty of heart. Joran's arm wrapped around her neck, cutting off her air. Vincent attacked her, cursing, his blows nearly as wild as Owen's. Kell's vision was going to dark when her hands pulled Joran's arm away. Kell gasped for air. Dark breeches and white shirts on her rescuers told her palace servants had put a halt to things. Two hands wrapped around her arm and drew her to her feet. Kell looked down a couple of inches into Owen of Jeslaw's shining gray eyes. "That was jolly," he said. Apparently a bloody nose and a cut that dripped blood into your ear were not important. "Did you learn to fight like that here?" "So," Lord Wilden coldly eyed Kell and Owen. "Already you instruct the new boys in your brawling ways." "We fell down," Kell replied steadily. She knew this play by heart. So did the training master. First he questioned the senior pages, who claimed they had fallen. Then he questioned her, and for the first time, the boy who'd been the object of the hazing. No other first years had stayed to help before. "3 footmen and a torch boy said you were fighting," Lord Wilden pointed out. "They were mistaken, my lord," she replied. Wilden drummed his fingers on his desk. Finally he said, "Owen of Jeslaw, you have made a very poor start. Report to Oscar Woodrow at the forge outside the squire's armory for the first bell of time every night after supper for a week. You may cool your passions by sharpening swords." His brown eyes locked on Kell. "As for you, Mindelen, report to Stefan Groomsman at the same hour. He's to find you work pitching hay down from the stable lofts." Clammy sweat broke out between Kell's shoulder blades. "Stable lofts, my lord. Of course." At training camp before the summer holiday, Lord Wilden had made Kell climb every day to deal with her fear of heights. Kell bit her lip guiltily. While she had trained all summer, she had not tried to look down from anything higher than a few steps. "I bet he knew," she thought queasily. "I bet he knew I didn't climb anything on holiday." "A final word, Page Calidry." Lord Wilden stood, bracing his hands on his desk. "This will stop," he said tightly. "There was never so much fighting before you came. It will end now." Maybe you just never heard about all the fights, Kell thought wearily. Big boys picking on little ones just to be mean. Maybe no one made enough of a fuss to bring it to your notice. From the corner of her eye, she saw the red-faced Owen open his mouth. Kell bowed to Wilden and managed to stumble, banging into the new boy. The training master waited for them to stand at attention once more, then dismissed them. "Why'd you do that?" demanded Owen when they closed the door behind him. "Why'd you bump into me?" "Because you were about to say something," she replied calmly. "You weren't supposed to say anything except that you fell down. Whatever punishment he gives you, whatever he says, you take it in silence." "But they started it," he argued. "You were helping out another noble, like we're supposed to, and they waded into you." Kell sighed. That's not why I did it. Turning into their own hallway, Kell and Owen halted. The prince, Neil, Cleon, and Kell's other friends stood there, waiting. Good evening, your highness, Kell said. Prince Rold nodded gravely. Neil strode over to her. What on earth did you think you were doing? I thought we solved all this last year. Kell replied. We did. Then why did you patrol without us? We had a deal. We went with you and we dealt with that lot as a team. Don't yell at her, Owen snapped. You should have seen her fight. And they started it. The prince smiled at him. Rold of Conte was a fourth-year page, quiet and contained, with his father's very blue eyes and black hair that could have come from either of his parents. He was so polite that he appeared stiff, and he made friends with difficulty, but when he spoke, he was listened to. We've been trying to stop the hazing of first years, he told Owen, and I believe I suggested that you study with our group. Rold was Owen's sponsor, charged with teaching him palace ways. But there was a library, your highness, Owen said, a big one. I was just going to look. And I wasn't patrolling, replied Kell. I had to see Dane. When I came downstairs, she shrugged. And got a black eye for your pains, Neil said with disgust. He reached toward her, green magical fire shimmering around his fingertips. Kell stepped back. You'll get in trouble with my lord if you heal something he can see, she pointed out. Fix Owen's cut. Now it was the plump boy's turn to step back. What? Owen demanded nervously. Neil has the healer's gift of magic, said the prince. Don't be silly. He can at least make it so the cut in your nose don't hurt as much. Owen rolled his eyes, but let Neil care for his injuries. The cut in his scalp was shallow. Neil shrank that. The nose isn't worth troubling with, he told Owen. It's not broken, just be careful how you blow it. He looked at Kell with a rueful smile. Might we at least get some classwork done? Kell went to her rooms. Gathering her books, she was trying to remember her assignments when she heard a sound behind her. She whirled, dropping her books. Someone gasped and ducked inside the dressing room. Who? Kell began, then remembered. Lalassa. She would sleep in the dressing room, like the servants who attended other pages. Kell had seen Lalassa's cot and the wooden screen that gave her privacy when she took her bath. It's just me. The older girl peered around the door, then ran forward and knelt to gather Kell's fallen books. My lady, forgive me. I never meant. She glanced up at Kell and gasped again. My lady! Your pardon, your poor eye! Who could have done such a thing? Shall I fetch a healer? No, uncle says only my Lord Wilden may approve healers. A cut of meat, perhaps. Ice from the ice house, if they'll let me have it. Oh, my lady, she wailed, her hands clasped before her. Kell blinked at her. It's just a black eye, she said. Please don't dither at me. But it's all swollen, how can you see? Badly, admitted Kell. It'll mend. I've had them before. Doesn't it hurt? Begged Lalassa. You act like it's nothing. Kell shrugged. It hurts, yes, but not as bad as some I've had. May I have my books, please? I have to study. Neil stuck his head in the door. Are you coming? He demanded. We only have a bell left before bedtime, and half of us are stumped on the catapult mathematics problem. Who's she? Kell sighed and introduced Neil to Lalassa. The girl, who had been so outspoken in her dismay, went quiet the moment she saw Neil. Silently she backed toward the dressing room, stopping only to curtsy when Kell gave her friend's name. Why hide? Wondered Kell as she left the room with Neil. Does she know you? She asked as they went to his rooms. No, should she? I mean, I saw her working in the squire's wing once or twice last year. Timid little creature. His chambers were crowded. Within the addition of the first years to their study group, there was a boy on every surface that might be claimed as a seat. The cluster on the bed shifted, making room for Kell. They were all boys who'd gotten her help with mathematics before. It was Kell's favorite subject, and she was good at it. Who would believe it was just Neil and me a year ago, she thought. I thought we'd never have any friends, what with Lord Wilden hating him for being 15 and educated, and me being the girl. About to take the offered place, she had an idea. You know, they do allow study groups to meet in the libraries, she smiled. I believe there's room for us in the classroom wing library. Last year, Jor and his friends had made life miserable for any first year who entered the room. was only right that their group reclaim it for people who wanted to study. The boys looked at each other, then at Kel. Without a word, they gathered their things and streamed out of Neil's room. Owen left skipping to a soft chant of books, 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 books. Neil threw open his arms as if to embrace this now empty chamber. What shall I do with all this space in the evenings? He inquired airily, waving Kel out ahead of him. Plant a garden, perhaps? Begin my eagerly awaited career in sculpting? If I were you, I'd practice my staff work, Kel replied. You need to. The bell that signaled the end of the day clanged, and the pages returned to their rooms. By then, Kel felt each and every bruise from the fight and from her day's training with that weighted harness. Stiffly she put her books on her desk, noticing a mild, clean scent in the air. I fixed willow tea for my lady, explained Lalassa as she poured a cup from the kettle on the hearth, and Salma gave me a package for you. Kel looked the package over. It was like others she'd received from an unknown benefactor. A plain canvas wrapper, tied with string and a plain label. She undid the knots and pulled the canvas away to reveal a small wooden box. She wriggled the top off to reveal the contents. A pamphlet and 3 oval leather balls, each of a size that would fit into her palm. Did her mysterious well-wisher want her to learn to juggle? She picked up a ball which was heavier than it looked. Kel squeezed it. From the texture, it was filled with sand. What on earth? She muttered, and leafed through the pamphlet. It was hand-lettered and clearly illustrated. Suddenly she began to grin. What is it, my lady? Asked the maid. Exercises, replied Kel, for my arms and my hands. She molded the leather ball in her left hand, squeezing hard. This is supposed to strengthen my grip. How does he know? Or she? What's needed? Kel wondered, scanning the descriptions of the exercises. Last year it had been a good knife, her jar of precious magic bruise balm, and a fine tilting saddle for Peach Blossom. Now it was more exercises, small ones she could do any time, that would help to build strength in her hands and arms. Reminded of the bruise balm, Kel took the jar out of her desk and dabbed a little on her swollen eye. The throbbing ache in it began to fade. I wish I knew who you were, she thought, sipping the tea that Lalassa had made. I would like to thank you and ask why you do these things for me. There you are.